The love I almost missed, healing through heartbreak and rediscovered love. Before I tell you what happened, you have to understand who I used to be. There was a time when I measured love by its loudness. How explosive, how intense, how much it made my heart race like I was standing too close to a cliff. That kind of love doesn't whisper, it roars. I used to think that if it didn't hurt a little, it wasn't real. If it didn't leave me breathless, it wasn't worth it. Maybe that's what happens when your first taste of romance is with someone who turns your world upside down and calls it passion. That's how it was with me and Lena. We met in college, both young and hungry for something more than just lectures and exams. She had this way of looking at you like she already knew your secrets, like she was daring you to let her break them open. And I did. Willingly, stupidly, completely. It was a relationship built on fire and gasoline. We ignited each other and then acted surprised when everything burned down. I think we thought that drama meant depth. That breaking up and making up again meant we were fighting for something, not just fighting because we didn't know how to talk. After we finally ended for good, after the screaming phone calls, the unread messages, the long silences that stretched into years, I promised myself I'd never go through that again. I didn't want another love that felt like war. So I closed that chapter and told myself I was wiser now. Smarter, better at protecting my peace. But no one tells you that healing doesn't always make you ready. Sometimes it just makes you scared. I spent the next few years drifting in and out of what I generously call connections. A few dates here, a couple of hopeful text threads there. Nothing ever stuck. Maybe because I wasn't really trying. Maybe because I was too busy building my career, learning how to live on my own terms, proving to myself and to no one in particular that I didn't need love to be whole. And I was fine. Really, I was. I had a job that paid well enough, a few close friends, a gym I went to out of guilt more than joy. It was a life you could live and not complain about. But it was also a life where I never really looked forward to tomorrow. Then came Zoe, and nothing about her arrival was dramatic. There was no lightning bolt moment, no whirlwind encounter. She came into my life like a slow, steady breeze. Unexpected, gentle, persistent. We met at a friend's engagement party. Not mine, obviously. I wasn't the type to host anything that involved RSVP cards or speeches. She was standing by the drinks table, pouring white wine with a frown that looked like it didn't belong on her face. I remember that more than anything else. The mismatch between her bright dress and the way her brow furrowed like she was trying to solve a problem she couldn't name. I said something stupid. I don't remember what it was, but it made her laugh. A real laugh, the kind that starts in your throat and shakes your shoulders. I think that's when I first felt the shift. It wasn't attraction in the way I'd known it. It wasn't that surge of adrenaline I used to chase. It was quieter than that, but warmer too. Like walking into sunlight after weeks of gray. We talked the rest of the evening. Not the surface kind of talk you have with strangers where you both nod and smile and forget everything the next day. Real conversation. She told me about her work, graphic design, mostly freelance, mostly frustrating. And I told her about mine, which was some hybrid of tech consulting and solving people's problems with spreadsheets. She told me she liked old buildings, rainy Sundays, and that she hated cucumbers with an irrational passion. I told her I liked bookstores, coffee that tasted burnt, and that I used to write poetry I never showed anyone. I think that last part surprised her. She looked at me for a long second and then said, "That makes sense." And I've never forgotten that. We didn't exchange numbers that night. We weren't drunk enough to pretend we were in a movie. But we ran into each other again a week later, at a local cafe I didn't even know she frequented. She looked up from her laptop and smiled like she'd been expecting me. I still wonder if she had. From then on, things unfolded slowly. We didn't rush. No grand confessions, no racing hearts, just moments that accumulated like drops of water, quiet and constant, until one day I realized I was drowning in them. In the best way. I started to look forward to texts from her, not because they thrilled me, but because they felt like home. We began sharing routines. Thursday night walks, Sunday markets. Tuesdays where we cooked and burned everything and ordered takeout anyway. She didn't ask me to change. She didn't try to crack me open or pull drama out of my chest. She just listened, not in the way people pretend to, but in the way that makes you feel like every word you say matters. I told her about Lena once. Not in detail, just enough for her to understand that I'd loved before and been broken by it. She didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, "That must have been hard." Not jealous, not curious, just kind. And maybe that's what scared me most, the kindness. Because I wasn't used to love that didn't come with conditions. I kept waiting for the catch. For her to lose patience, for me to sabotage it before it got too real. But weeks became months, and every time I thought, this can't be it. This can't be the kind of love people write stories about. She'd do something small that made me realize maybe I was finally in the right story. Like the time I had a terrible week and she left a note on my door that said, "You're allowed to rest. I'll be here when you wake up." Or the time she met my parents and made my mom laugh so hard she cried. Or the night she stayed up with me after I had a panic attack I didn't see coming. Just held my hand and didn't ask me to explain it. I started to believe, slowly, that this could last. That maybe love didn't have to be loud to be real. That maybe the quiet kind, the steady, sturdy, undramatic love, was the kind worth fighting for. But of course, life doesn't give you peace without testing it. It happened in December. A job offer, San Francisco. Big company, big salary, big future. Her dream gig, the kind that only comes once if you're lucky. We were sitting at our favorite booth in the diner by her place, the one with the cracked red vinyl seats and the jukebox that never worked. She told me about the offer, eyes wide, voice shaking. She was excited, terrified, hopeful, and I was silent. Not because I wasn't happy for her. I was, truly. But I also knew what it meant. We both did. Neither of us said it out loud, but the air around us turned heavy. I smiled, told her we'd figure it out, that we could make long distance work, that we were strong enough, and maybe we were. But sometimes, love isn't about strength. Sometimes it's about timing. And I had no idea then how much ours was about to unravel. But I also didn't know that the unraveling wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a truth I wasn't ready to face. The love I had always needed was never meant to come easy. It was meant to be chosen. Over and over again, even when it didn't make sense, even when the world tried to pull it apart. I just hadn't learned that yet. Not then, but I was about to. She moved in late January, when the snow turned to slush and the sky stayed a dull, unchanging gray. We spent her last few days in the city packing boxes that neither of us had the heart to tape shut. Every item we wrapped felt like a goodbye. Every drawer we emptied felt like we were draining the life out of something we weren't sure how to keep alive. I helped carry her things to the moving truck, smiling too much and talking too little. She kissed me before she climbed into the passenger seat of her friend's car, said, "I'll call you tonight," and smiled like she believed it would all be okay. And I let her go. Not because I wanted to, but because I loved her enough not to ask her to stay. The first few weeks passed in a blur. At first, we talked every night. Video calls where we sat in bed like we used to, only now separated by time zones and glowing screens. We told each other about our days, shared small frustrations and dumb jokes, like nothing had changed. But something had. Slowly, quietly, inevitably, the rhythm began to slip. One night she'd fall asleep before we talked. Another I'd get stuck in a late meeting and forget to message her until after midnight. The text became shorter, the calls less frequent. We told ourselves it was temporary, just a phase, just adjustment. But deep down I think we both knew. We were starting to live separate lives. I didn't blame her. San Francisco was everything she'd hoped for and more. Her messages were filled with stories about her new team, the projects she was finally getting to lead, the office with floor to ceiling windows and free kombucha on tap. I told her I was happy for her. I even meant it. But there was a part of me, small, quiet, ashamed, that resented every new detail she loved about her new world because it reminded me I wasn't in it. I tried to stay busy. I took on more clients, joined a weekend climbing group even though I hated heights, started going to open mics again with poems I never read. But nothing filled the space she'd left. The apartment felt too big without her shoes by the door. Coffee didn't taste right without her humming some half-remembered tune in the kitchen. Nights were the worst. I'd fall asleep scrolling through our old photos, trying to convince myself we still had a future worth fighting for. We visited each other a few times in the first 6 months. She came back in March just for a weekend. It felt rushed, like we were trying to squeeze an entire relationship into 48 hours. We walked the old streets, went to our diner, laughed too loudly like we used to. But I noticed the hesitation in her eyes, the way she looked over my shoulder when her phone buzzed. I pretended not to care. She left Sunday night, and I didn't cry. I just sat on the floor of the shower until the water ran cold. When I visited her in May, her world felt too shiny for me. Her apartment was sleek and sterile, filled with modern furniture and plants she forgot to water. Her friends were all driven, polished, brilliant. They talked about startups and hiking retreats and tech ethics. I smiled and nodded, but I felt like an artifact from a different life. That night, we lay in bed back to back, and the silence between us was the loudest it had ever been. We didn't fight. That's the thing. We didn't scream or accuse or break anything. We just drifted, like two boats that had once been tied together, slowly pulling away with the current. I kept thinking, if we're not breaking, we must be okay. But sometimes, love doesn't break, it fades. And that's harder to notice, harder to admit, harder to stop. By summer, we were talking once or twice a week. I stopped asking how her day went because the answers made me feel like a stranger. She stopped asking about mine because I think she already knew I wasn't doing great. I was unraveling in slow motion. I started sleeping in later, missing deadlines, ghosting friends. The only thing I didn't give up was pretending, because the moment I admitted we were falling apart, it would make it real. And I wasn't ready for that. Then one night, in late July, she called. Her voice was quiet, like she'd been rehearsing what to say all day. I remember every word, not because they were dramatic, but because they weren't. She said, "I think we're holding on to something that's not here anymore." I didn't argue. I just listened. She said she still cared, that she always would, that maybe in another time we would have made it work. I told her I loved her, that part I needed her to know. She didn't say it back. And that was when I finally understood. It was over. After the call ended, I didn't move for a long time. I sat in the dark with the phone still in my hand, like maybe if I held it long enough, she'd come back through it. But she didn't. She was gone, not in the way Lena had left, with fire and noise. This time was like watching a light turn off in the distance and realizing you didn't notice it was dimming until it disappeared. Grief, when love ends quietly, is strange. You don't cry all at once. You don't scream into pillows. You just wake up each morning with a little more weight in your chest, a little less music in your days. You function, you eat, you work. But everything feels grayscale. I stopped writing, stopped listening to our playlists. I took down the photos, but left one tucked in the drawer by my bed, just in case. People told me I'd move on. That time heals. That if it was meant to be, it would have been. And maybe they were right, but none of that helped at 2 a.m. when I woke up reaching for her, forgetting she wasn't beside me. Or when I walked past the bookstore where we used to waste whole Saturdays. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some days I was okay. Others, I felt like I was drowning in memories I couldn't escape. Fall came. The trees turned gold and the world kept spinning. I started to breathe a little easier. I even laughed again once or twice. I met people. New faces, new stories, but none of them stuck. Maybe because I wasn't letting them. or maybe because I was still holding space for something I knew wasn't coming back. Then came the message. One rainy afternoon in November, after weeks of silence, she texted. Just one line, "Are you free to talk?" My heart didn't race. It didn't stop. It just paused. I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed back, "Sure." We spoke that evening. It wasn't what I expected. She wasn't asking to come back. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She just wanted to tell me thank you. For everything. For the love. For the kindness. For letting her go. She said she was doing well, that she missed me, but she didn't regret anything. And for the first time, I didn't either. We said goodbye again. A softer one. A real one. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because I stopped loving her, but because I realized love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go with grace. Life went on, as it always does. I started writing again, small things at first, scraps of poems, half-finished stories. I started walking in the mornings just to feel the air on my skin. I began to see beauty in the quiet again. And slowly, quietly, I began to open up to possibility, to the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was still a love out there waiting for me, one that wouldn't leave, one that wouldn't fade. And I had no idea that love was already on its way to me, in a form I never would have expected. But that part of the story, I'll tell you next, because love, the real kind, never enters your life the same way twice. Sometimes it comes in like a storm, but sometimes it arrives like a letter you forgot you sent, finally returning home with an answer you didn't know you were still waiting for. It was around early December when I met Tessa, though to say we met makes it sound like a moment of fate, as if the universe aligned something poetic. In truth, it was embarrassingly mundane. I was standing in line at a neighborhood bakery, the kind that always smells like warm cinnamon and childhood, waiting for a loaf of sourdough I didn't need. She was ahead of me, arguing softly with the cashier about whether oat milk was truly unavailable, or if they'd just forgotten to restock it again. Her tone wasn't rude, just tired. And when she turned around and caught me smirking at her very specific irritation, she rolled her eyes and said, "Don't judge me. This place is my last hope for decent coffee." I didn't. In fact, I was grateful. It was the first time in months that something unexpected didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a thread. And I wanted to follow it. We didn't exchange numbers then. We didn't need to. Because 2 days later I saw her again. This time in the library, same section. Same worn-out copy of Joan Didion in her hands. She glanced at me, recognized me instantly, and said, "If you're stalking me, you're doing a very bad job." I laughed. That laugh, the first real one in so long, felt like an old muscle remembering how to move. She wasn't like Zoe. She wasn't like Lena either. Tessa had this calm gravity about her, like she was always exactly where she meant to be, and you were lucky to orbit close for even a moment. She didn't chase or pull. She didn't need to. You leaned in naturally. We talked there, between the shelves, for nearly 2 hours. About Didion, yes, and how heartbreak lives quietly in her sentences. But also about other things, favorite smells. Hers rosemary. Mine was pine after rain. Worst dates, hers involved a man who tried to sell her on cryptocurrency mid-appetizer. And the last time we cried in public, hers was at a film screening. Mine was in an Uber after Zoe's last message. She didn't flinch at that. She just said, "Well, that explains the eyes. You look like someone who's learned not to look back too often." And I suppose I had. Or maybe I thought I had. But something about her made me curious again. About people, about stories, about the spaces between what we say and what we mean. We started seeing each other more often, not with urgency but with ease. Coffee turned into walks. Walks turned into dinners. And before I knew it, she knew things about me I hadn't even noticed I'd shared. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything, that I was still in recovery, still finding my feet, and she never rushed me. That's what made her different. She never asked me where this was going, never pushed for declarations or promises. She just showed up, again and again. And in doing so, she taught me how to show up too. Not perform, not pretend, just be. I remember one night in particular. It had snowed all day, and the city had fallen quiet beneath its weight. We were walking home after dinner, neither of us in a hurry. The air was cold enough to sting, but neither of us mentioned it. She stopped at the corner of an intersection, looked up at the falling flakes, and said, "Sometimes I think snow is the only honest weather. It doesn't hide anything. It just covers it all and makes you look again." I didn't say anything. I just watched her. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: safety. Not excitement. Not lust. Not nostalgia. Just a gentle, undeniable sense of being exactly where I was supposed to be. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. There are some silences that say everything. Instead, she took my hand in hers, slipped it into her coat pocket with hers, and we kept walking. Side by side. Step by step. Over the next few weeks, something inside me began to settle. I stopped checking Zoe's profile. I stopped measuring every good thing against the shadow of what came before. Tessa wasn't filling a void. She wasn't a replacement. She was a beginning I hadn't known I was allowed to hope for. I started writing again. Not just poems, but essays, short stories, even a piece about grief that I submitted anonymously to an online journal. They published it. I didn't tell anyone it was mine, not even Tessa. But she read it. She said it felt like it was written by someone who had loved deeply and lost even deeper. I smiled and told her, maybe it was. It wasn't perfect. We had our miscommunications. There was the night she canceled on me last minute because of work, and I reacted poorly, more out of fear than frustration. I was scared I was starting to need her. That old panic, that loving someone meant eventually losing them, came rushing back. I apologized the next day. She forgave me without making me grovel. She simply said, "I want this to be honest, even when it's messy." That's when I knew I wasn't afraid of heartbreak anymore. I was afraid of letting someone in and not being brave enough to stay. By February, she had a drawer in my apartment. By March, I had a toothbrush at her place. It wasn't official in the way you mark relationships on social media. It was official in the way she knew exactly how I took my coffee, and I knew she always read before bed, even if just a page. It was the kind of love that didn't need to announce itself. And then, one morning, the phone call came. Not hers, mine. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to. It was Zoe's sister. Her voice was shaking. She asked if we could meet. That it was important. That it was about Zoe. I told Tessa that night. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't look threatened. She just said, "If you need to go, go. I trust you," and I believed her. That trust, that unwavering faith, was the anchor I didn't know I needed. I met Zoe's sister in a quiet cafe on the edge of town. She looked older than I remembered, warier. She slid an envelope across the table to me. "Zoe wanted you to have this," she said. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at her, trying to understand. That's when she told me Zoe was sick. Had been for months. She'd kept it from almost everyone. The job in San Francisco had been real, yes, but the move had also been about treatments, doctors, second opinions. She hadn't wanted to burden me. That's why she pulled away. Not because she stopped loving me, but because she didn't want me to watch her fade. I opened the letter that night. Her handwriting was shaky, but unmistakable. She wrote about how she'd loved me. Not just loved me, but learned from me. That our time together had taught her gentleness, patience, depth. That she was proud of the man I was becoming. And then, the part that broke me, she told me to let her go. Really let go. That she'd made peace with her path. That I shouldn't waste my time searching for ghosts. That love, real love, was in the living, in the choosing, in the staying. I cried harder than I had in years, not out of guilt, not even grief, but release. It was like she had finally given me permission to move forward, not just away. To love again without apology. Tessa held me that night, didn't ask questions, didn't need to. She just lay beside me, her hand in mine, steady as breath. And I knew, with a clarity I hadn't known possible, that I wasn't going to lose her, because I wasn't going to run. It's strange the way life builds, the way each love leaves something behind. Zoe taught me how to feel. Lena taught me what I didn't want. And Tessa was teaching me how to stay. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, fully. I stopped waiting for love to save me. I started choosing it instead. And in doing so, I became someone I could finally recognize in the mirror. Not broken, not waiting, but whole. Little did I know, though, that love, true love, is never the final chapter. Sometimes it's just the middle of a story still being written. And the next page, it held a twist I never saw coming. Tessa and I slipped into a rhythm most couples only dream of. One built not on fireworks, but on quiet understanding. Our lives weren't extravagant, but they were stitched together with intention. Morning coffees became rituals, walks without destinations turned into hours of conversation. And silences were filled not with awkwardness but with comfort. We learned how to argue well, how to apologize without pride, and how to hold space when the other needed time. It felt like I had finally stepped out of the chaos of searching and into the peace of arriving. But peace, I've learned, is fragile. It doesn't announce its departure. It fades slowly. Then all at once, it started with her being distant, not cold. Never cold, but distracted. She was always checking her phone, replying to messages with carefully hidden urgency. She began working later, staying out longer under the guise of creative collaboration. At first, I didn't think much of it. I believed in her. I trusted her. But then came the first broken plan. A dinner she missed, then a weekend away we postponed, then a conversation she shut down with a tired smile and a kiss on the forehead. "We'll talk tomorrow," she'd say, but tomorrow kept slipping away. I tried not to assume. I reminded myself of what I'd been through, of how easy it is to let fear paint over truth with the colors of past wounds. But one night, as we lay in bed, I saw the screen of her phone light up with a name I didn't recognize. She turned it over quickly, too quickly, and in that single movement, the peace we'd built together trembled. I didn't ask that night. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and counted the spaces between our breaths, wondering how many of them now held things unspoken. The next morning, she left early. No coffee, no kiss. Just the sound of the door closing softly, like she didn't want to wake a version of me who might start asking questions. And still, I told myself it was nothing. That love, real love, meant patience. That people go through things and not every shadow is a sign of betrayal. But my instincts, dulled though they were by hope, wouldn't quiet. So I did something I'm not proud of. I opened her laptop one afternoon while she was in the shower. Just for a second. Just to quiet the noise in my head. What I found wasn't scandalous. Not at first, just messages, conversations, most innocent. But then I saw the photos of her and a man I didn't recognize. Not intimate, not damning, but close, familiar, smiling in ways I hadn't seen from her in weeks. My stomach dropped. I closed the laptop, sat on the edge of the bed, waited. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, humming to herself like nothing had shifted in the axis of our lives, I couldn't look at her. She noticed, asked what was wrong, and I, coward that I was, said nothing. Just shook my head and kissed her cheek, tasting salt that wasn't hers. The days that followed were filled with silence dressed up as routine. We went through motions, pretended we were fine. But love, when built on truth, can't survive too long under the weight of a lie. One night, she came home late. I was on the couch, lights off, TV murmuring in the background. She sat beside me, took my hand and said, "I need to tell you something." I braced myself for heartbreak, for anger, for goodbye. But what came next wasn't any of those things. She told me his name was Marcus, that they'd met through a mutual friend, that they'd spent time together, yes. But she swore it hadn't gone further than conversation, that he reminded her of a version of herself she used to be. That talking to him was like talking to the past. Not because she missed it, but because she was trying to make peace with it. "I didn't cheat," she said. but I hid things. And that's just as bad? She cried. I didn't. I felt numb. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. I told her I needed space, not to punish her, but to hear my own thoughts without the echo of hers. She understood, packed a bag, didn't ask how long I'd need, just kissed me softly on the forehead, like I'd kissed her once when things were simple, and walked out. That night, I sat in the quiet and tried to sort through what I felt. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even betrayal. It was grief. Grief for the version of us I thought was unshakable. Grief for the piece I had finally learned to trust. I thought about Zoe, about how her leaving had felt like being pulled under a wave I never saw coming. And now, with Tessa, it was different. Slower, like a leak in a boat you didn't notice until your shoes were wet. But I also thought about her honesty, about how hard it must have been to come clean, about the fact that she had chosen to tell me rather than let me keep living in the illusion of stability. That counted for something. Maybe not enough to erase the pain, but enough to not let it rot into resentment. We didn't talk for a week. In that time, I returned to old habits. Writing late into the night, long walks alone, replaying every moment between us like a film I wasn't ready to stop watching. I asked myself hard questions. Did I still love her? Could I trust her again? Was I holding on because I was afraid of starting over, or because I truly believed in what we had? Then, one morning, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. I opened it and immediately recognized the looping script. It was from Zoe. The last of her letters, sent to me by her sister posthumously, months after the first. In it, she wrote not about us, but about me. About how she'd always known I'd love again. That I deserved someone who chose me every day, not just when it was convenient. That the hardest part of love wasn't falling into it, but choosing to stay when it got hard. And then, one line that changed everything. Love, the real kind, isn't afraid of breaking. It's afraid of pretending it's not already broken. I folded the letter, read it again, and then again. And then I called Tessa. We met at the park where we'd first kissed. She looked tired, guarded. But when she saw me walking toward her, something softened. I told her about the letter, about Zoe's words, about what I felt. And I told her the truth. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't have guarantees, but I wasn't ready to give up on us. Not if she wasn't. She took my hand, held it tightly, and for the first time in weeks, we breathed in sync. Healing after betrayal, even a soft one, isn't easy. It's not linear. Some days I woke up and felt like I trusted her again. Other days I questioned everything. But through it all, we kept showing up. Therapy, conversations, hard truths. It wasn't romantic, not in the traditional sense, but it was love. The gritty, raw, determined kind. Spring came, flowers bloomed. We took a trip, just a weekend, nothing fancy, to a cabin by a lake. No signal, no distractions. Just us and the quiet hum of nature. We cooked meals together, sat by the fire, read books out loud. One night, as we watched the stars, she turned to me and said, "I'm still learning how to be good at this, but I want to learn with you." And I realized that's what love really is. Not perfection, not certainty, but willingness. A daily, deliberate choice to try again. We came back from that trip with lighter hearts. We weren't fixed, but we were healing, together. The version of love I had chased in my youth, the one filled with passion and chaos, had taught me what to run from. The love I had with Zoe had taught me about grace. And Tessa was teaching me about resilience. But life, in its strange poetry, wasn't done with us yet. Because just when I thought the storm had passed, just when I began to believe I was finally in the clear, a message arrived that would undo everything we'd rebuilt. A name I hadn't heard in years. A voice I thought I'd never hear again. Lena. Her name lit up on my phone like a ghost blinking back into existence. Lena, missed call. Stared at me from the screen, surreal and strangely weightless, like a dream I couldn't quite convince myself was real. The last time I'd spoken to her, we were both shouting. Angry, bitter, clawing at the end of something we had no idea how to fix. That was years ago, another lifetime. And yet here she was, reappearing as though no time had passed at all. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My heart was pounding. Not with longing, not even with anger, but with confusion. Why now? Why her? Why? Just as I was beginning to believe in stability again, did the past decide to knock? I didn't tell Tessa immediately. I needed time to understand what this meant, if it meant anything at all. I kept imagining that maybe it was a mistake, a pocket dial, an accidental thumb slip into my contact list. But then, the next morning, a message followed. Can we talk? Just once. It's not what you think. Simple. Clean. As if she knew exactly how to trigger curiosity without setting off alarm bells. And maybe she did. She had always been good at that, pulling people in without letting them know they were already halfway under. I stared at that message for hours. I reread it until the words blurred. And then, without meaning to, I replied. Why? That was it. No hello, no softness. Just the question that hadn't left me since her name re-entered my life. The reply came quickly. Closure. I owe it to you, to both of us. Closure. That word again. The one people toss around like a gift, as though it's something you can give or take or wrap in neat emotional packaging. But something in her message felt genuine. Not manipulative. Not cruel. Just unfinished. I told Tessa that evening. We were folding laundry of all things. Domestic, mundane, normal. And I shattered it with 4 words. Lena reached out today. She stopped mid-fold, a sock in her hand, and looked at me. Not with fear or suspicion. Just with that deep, intuitive awareness she always carried. What did she say? I told her. Every word, every pause. She listened quietly, then asked, Do you want to see her? I hesitated. I don't know. She nodded, swallowed, then said something I didn't expect. If it's a ghost that's still following you, maybe you should let it speak. Otherwise, it keeps whispering. And just like that, she gave me permission. Not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to trust me with my own heart. I met Lena at a cafe across town, one neither of us had ever been to before. Neutral territory. The kind of place where nothing had memories etched into its walls. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. She looked older. Not tired, just more defined, like time had shaped her into someone sharper, more grounded. Our eyes met, and in that moment, 1,000 memories flooded me. The good, the devastating, the stupid, the sacred. And yet, sitting across from her now, none of it hurt. Not the way I thought it would. She smiled, tentative. He? I nodded. He. Silence stretched between us like an old bridge, shaky but still standing. Then she said, I didn't come here to open old wounds. I leaned back. Then why did you come? Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. Because I never said thank you. And I never said sorry. And I think we left things broken in a way that didn't need to be. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. She told me about her life now. About how, after we ended, she spiraled. That she'd tried to bury what we had under new people, new cities, new distractions. And that it never worked. I wasn't good to you, she said. Bah, it wasn't because I didn't love you. It was because I didn't know how. I felt something stir inside me. An old ache I thought I'd buried. But it wasn't anger. It was grief. Not for her, not anymore. But for the version of myself who had once believed that love and pain were the same thing. I loved you too, I said quietly. But we weren't good together. She nodded. I know. That's what I needed to say. Not to change anything. Just to let it rest. But we parted with a hug. Brief. Clean. Nothing lingering. And as I walked away, I felt lighter. Like I had just laid down a burden I'd been carrying without realizing it. I didn't look back. And I didn't need to. That part of my life was over. When I came home, Tessa was on the couch, reading. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. I sat beside her, took her hand, and said, It's done, really done. She smiled, not because she'd won anything, but because she believed me. And in that moment, I realized how rare that kind of belief is. How precious. The days that followed were strange, peaceful, but surreal. I kept waiting for some emotional aftershock that never came. Instead, I found clarity. I started seeing Tessa more clearly, not as a refuge from the past, but as a partner for the future. We began talking about things we hadn't dared to before. Living together, maybe even marriage. Not in fairy tale terms, but as a real grown-up commitment, a choice, a promise to keep choosing each other. But then, just as everything seemed to settle, a new twist arrived. Not emotional, not romantic, but deeply, deeply personal. A phone call from my mother. One of those heavy-voiced, pause-filled calls you know won't end well. "It's your father," she said. "He's in the hospital. It's serious." And just like that, love had to step aside for duty. I flew home the next morning. Tessa packed my bags, kissed my forehead, and said, "Go, I'll be here when you come back." I believed her. I needed to. Seeing my father in that hospital bed was jarring. He'd always been a pillar. Stubborn, stoic, unmovable. Now he was pale, frail, hooked to machines that beeped like metronomes of mortality. We hadn't always been close. He didn't know how to say, "I love you," except in gestures. Fixing things, paying for things, showing up quietly when it mattered. We hadn't spoken much in the past year, and I carried guilt for that. During those long hospital days, I found myself reflecting not just on him, but on myself. On what kind of man I was becoming. On whether I was brave enough to love fully, or if I still held parts of myself back out of fear. And I thought of Tessa, of her quiet strength, her steady heart. And I knew I didn't want to waste another moment doubting. When my father stabilized enough for me to breathe again, I flew back. Tessa met me at the airport, arms wide, eyes tired but bright. I hugged her longer than usual. Whispered in her ear, "Let's stop waiting." That night, I didn't propose, but I asked her to move in, to build a life not someday but now. And she said yes, with tears in her eyes and a laugh on her lips. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. And it was ours. We started looking for a new apartment. Something shared, something fresh. A place that was us from the beginning. And just when I thought we had finally turned the last page of a long, complicated chapter, life whispered one more secret into our story. A letter arrived. This time, addressed to both of us. No return address. Inside was a photo, grainy old, of me and a woman I didn't recognize, holding hands in a park I didn't remember. And on the back, a single line written in a script that looked eerily familiar. "You don't know the whole story yet." Tessa looked at me, confused. I looked at the photo again. Something in the edges of memory stirred. Uneasy, distant, beckoning. And just like that, the past cracked open once more. The photo sat between us like a question we didn't know how to ask. Tessa turned it over in her hands again and again, eyes narrowing at the faded ink on the back. "You don't know the whole story yet." It sounded like a warning. Or a confession, or maybe both. I kept staring at the picture. At the version of me that looked younger by years, maybe more. My face was familiar but softer, less tired, untouched by everything I now carried. But the woman beside me, that was the mystery. Her features were partly obscured by the sunlight, but something about her posture, her expression, pulled at something deep inside me. Not recognition exactly. More like the ghost of a memory that never got the chance to form. "I don't remember this," I said finally. Tessa looked at me, her expression unreadable. Could it be photoshopped? I shook my head slowly. "Don't think so. But I honestly have no idea who she is." There was silence after that, thick and uncertain. For the first time in months, I felt the subtle shift between us. Not mistrust, not accusation, just the quiet discomfort of standing at the edge of something unknown. Tessa didn't push. She never did. But I could tell she was waiting for truth, for explanation, for something to make sense. That night, I barely slept. I kept the photo on my nightstand, hoping maybe in the flicker of moonlight or in some dream I'd remember. But the woman's face remained just beyond reach. The next morning, I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring, groggy but alert. "Is everything okay?" I hesitated. Do you remember if I ever dated someone before Lena? Someone before college, maybe. Someone older. She paused, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. There was a girl when you were in high school. Brief. You brought her around once or twice, but she was not from school. I never got the full story. My heart pounded. Do you remember her name? No, she said. But I remember she wore this green pendant. Always, like it meant something. Why are you asking? I mumbled a vague excuse and hung up. It wasn't much, but it was something. That evening, I went through an old box in my closet, the kind filled with crumpled ticket stubs, scribbled journal entries, and loose photos from my teenage years. I dug and dug until, near the bottom, I found it. A photo, different from the one that arrived, but unmistakably her. Same pendant, same half-smile. No name on the back. No note, just her, standing next to me on what looked like a boardwalk by the coast. I brought it to Tessa. She was real, I said. I still don't remember her name, but she was real. Tessa studied the photo. Why would someone send this now? And why that message? The question hung in the air, heavier than either of us expected. I didn't know how to answer. All I knew was that something from my past had clawed its way into the present, demanding to be seen. A week passed. Then another. We moved into the new apartment, a bright, sunlit space with creaky floors and ivy creeping over the windows. We tried to focus on the future, on building something new. But the photo remained in the drawer by my side of the bed, humming with unspoken questions. Until, one afternoon, another envelope arrived. This one thicker. No return address again. Inside was a journal. Old, worn mine. Except I didn't remember ever writing it. The handwriting was undeniably mine. The ink, the slant of the letters, the way I crossed my teats. It was me. But the entries, they were like reading someone else's life. The first page was dated a full year before I started college. Her name is Elise. We met at the beach. She says I make her feel safe. I don't know what that means yet. Elise. The name struck like lightning. Something shifted. A door opened. Tessa sat beside me as I read aloud. Entry after entry, it was all there. A whirlwind summer, late night drives, hidden rendezvous, and then a sudden stop. The last entry read simply, she said goodbye today. No warning, just left. Said she had to disappear. That someday I'd understand. Nothing after that? I looked at Tessa, my hands trembling. How do I not remember any of this? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned the journal over and pulled out a folded slip of paper that had been tucked in the back. A note. Newer. Typed, it read, "Before you decide your future, remember your past. Elise never stopped watching. You were in danger. She left to protect you. But now she's dying, and she wants to see you one last time." I felt like the room tilted sideways. Everything I'd believed about my past, about the narrative I'd built for myself, cracked. Tessa reached for my hand. "Do you want to find her?" I nodded slowly. "I think I have to." We traced the envelope as postmarked to a small coastal town hours away. It was a stretch, a guess. But something about the ocean, about that old photo on the boardwalk, it made sense. We made the drive in silence. Tessa insisted on coming. "I don't want you doing this alone," she said. I didn't argue. Her presence was the only thing keeping me grounded. The town was sleepy, almost eerily still. We asked at a few places, showed the photo. Most people shook their heads. Then, at a small antique shop near the edge of town, the old woman behind the counter leaned in and whispered, "You're looking for Elise. She lives up on the bluff. Has for years. Doesn't see many visitors." The house was small, tucked behind overgrown hedges and faded paint. I knocked. The door creaked open a moment later, and there she was. Older. Thinner. Her hair streaked with gray. But her eyes, those I remembered instantly, deep, sea, glass green. She smiled softly. "You came." I couldn't speak at first. My throat was tight. Finally, I managed. "What did you leave?" She led us inside. Sat down slowly, looked at both of us. "Because someone was watching you, someone dangerous. And if they thought we were together, you would have been in their crosshairs. So I vanished. I wiped what I could." I even found someone to help suppress the memories. That's why you forgot." She looked at me, tears in her eyes. "I hated doing it, but it kept you safe." Tessa, stunned, asked, "Who was watching him?" Elise shook her head. "It doesn't matter anymore. He's gone now. But I'm not long for this world either. I didn't want to leave without seeing him one last time, without telling him I loved him, that I always did." The air was heavy. I sat beside her, took her hand, and even though I didn't fully understand what had happened, I saw the truth in her eyes. A love sacrificed, a life rewritten. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." She died 2 weeks later. Peacefully, we were told. I attended the service. Tessa was with me every step of the way. I never got all the answers. Maybe I wasn't meant to, but I got enough to make peace. Months passed. Our life resumed. The apartment filled with laughter again. We hung new photos, ones we took together. But I kept the photo of Elise, not to mourn, not to remember. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and Tessa leaned her head against my shoulder, she whispered, "Do you feel like you finally know the whole story?" I thought for a moment, then said, "No, but I finally know which story I want to keep writing." And she smiled, because she already knew. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.